Hi guys, this is a video that I kind of just decided to make last minute, so you need to excuse the crudeness of it, but the intent is to help you out in at least starting your essay that is due on Thursday. So if you haven't already gathered your exit task instructions, go ahead and pause this and grab it because I'm going to be referring to it off and on. Also, it might be helpful to have a piece of paper and a pen handy. Anyway, so here I am on the cover sheet of the exit task. So I'm going to scroll down. And here you see that I've color-coded a couple of things. This is the prompt. And the prompt obviously is explain how humans respond when confronted with suffering in today's society. And notice that's in blue. So that's part 1 of the prompt. And the second part of the prompt is, and the effects or outcomes of those response choices. So that is part 2. Notice that they're color-coded because really the prompt is asking you to address 2 separate things. And so that is going to basically be an indicator of structure. So I want you to be thinking about those 2 things. That's important when formulating your overall argument or thesis. Also note that I've labeled it Claim 1 and Claim 2 because that also is an indicator for structure, that for Claim 1 you're going to need to deal with that blue part, that blue section, and for Claim 2 you're going to need to deal with that yellow section, that content. So let me show you a possibility, and again this is super low tech and crude, but this kind of gives you an idea what I'm talking about. So for creating your thesis, let me put something behind that. For creating a thesis, you're going to see I have blank, which results in blank. And underneath the blank, in that section, you're going to need to think about making a statement that explains behavioral patterns of people in response to suffering, which is part 1 of the prompt. Also later, it becomes Claim 1. The second part of the prompt tells you what should go in that second blank. The consequences, or the type of consequences or outcomes that result from that behavior, and that behavior refers to part 1 in your thesis. So you need to start plugging things in. Now, do you have to use which results in? No, I'm just showing you an example, and you can vary the language. So how this translates into ideas that we have talked about in class. So let me get that on there. Okay. So here we have the blank, which results in blank from the page before. So for that first part, because we're looking at how people respond to suffering, you could talk about indifference. For example, Elie Wiesel, Bob Herbert, Nick Kristof, they all talked about indifference. Additionally, like Janet Briner, she talked about one way people respond, or ultimately they weigh the cost and benefits to number 1, to ourselves. And so again, this is another statement that you can make for the beginning part of that prompt. So the second part is focused on consequences. So we talked about basically 3 kind of topics for consequences. The first, poverty and homelessness. The second, the oppression of women, essentially through limited access to education. And then third is, we talked about genocide or crimes against humanity. So all of these are results or outcomes of the behaviors that you may have discussed in part 1 of your argument or thesis. So important to kind of consider is whatever you listed in the part 1 of your thesis needs to relate to the consequences in part 2. So that's important. So here's how we could maybe structure it out. So again, I'm using the template, which results in blank, which results in blank, okay? So you can see that part 1 becomes claim 1, as we had talked about earlier, and you can break down claim 1, for example, into 2 subclaims, okay, to support that claim. And that claim, of course, supports your overall argument. The second part, again, becomes claim 2, and again, subclaims can vary. You know, you may have 1 subclaim, you may have 2 subclaims, you may have 3 subclaims. You need to determine that. There is no prescription for that. So you need to figure out what you want to talk about. So let me plug in some things just to kind of illustrate as an example. So we have claim 1. So again, remember we're looking at the template blank, which results in blank. So claim 1, you can see I've listed indifference in the cost of benefit to number 1. Okay, so those essentially become the 2 subclaims. Subclaim 1 is indifference, and subclaim 2 is the cost and benefit to number 1. And then which results in, and then subclaim number 1 would be the oppression of women, subclaim number 2, poverty and homelessness, subclaim number 3, crimes against humanity. So students often ask, how many subclaims do we have to have? Well, in this particular example, you can see that I have 2 subclaims for the first claim and 3 subclaims for the second claim. But again, that is not set in stone. You need to determine what it is you're going to use to support your overall argument. So here's how it could translate in terms of paragraphs. All right, so at the top we have blank, which results in blank, and you can see here I have 2 circles. Now, they represent claim 1 and claim 2. So you can see I have claim 1, or excuse me, subclaim 1, subclaim 2. And then over here I have claim 2, subclaim 1, 2, and 3. Now, at first glance, you might say, okay, that means that there are 2 body paragraphs. And the answer is yes, maybe. That's going to depend on you after you assess your writing. So claim 1 obviously is an indicator for topic sentence, okay? So that you would have that at the top of your body paragraph. And then you would go into your pie format. P is the subclaim, the point. I is your illustration or your evidence, and E is your evaluation or analysis. And you're going to repeat that pattern as we discussed in class. And you don't have to go in the IE format, but you can kind of mix it up. It's important to remember, though, that your ratios between evidence and analysis are balanced. So going back to the paragraphs. So another way you can attach it is to create a body paragraph using a topic sentence and your first subclaim, and then creating a second body paragraph for your second subclaim. So let me show you what I mean by that. If you go back to the packet that I provided for you, I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to go past introduction, and I'm going to get to the body paragraphs because that's what I really want to talk about. Here they are. Okay, so let's look at that first. Remember, blue is for the first part. So you can see point is here's topic sentence, claim, point, subclaim, IE. And again, this can vary. And it says right here, you can repeat until a point is supported. So let's go back to this for a second, just really quick. If you're going to divide this into 2 paragraphs, okay, because after you've written it, it's too much to kind of glump together from your perspective. You can, for your to kind of act as a transition, you can see here, right here, that I put closing statement or transition as in transitional statement. So let me show you this again. So what you would do is topic sentence and then your P, IE, or whatever. And then at the end here, you would use a transitional sentence. And then again, that would link you to the subclaim, number 2. And then you would end this with a closing statement or sentence. And so this essentially could be 2 body paragraphs. Over here, you can see claim 2. Again, you can set it up. It doesn't have to mirror what you did in claim 1. So if you want to just combine all these in this particular one and separate it here, that's fine. Or you can separate it out again by body paragraphs using the similar mentality. So again, claim 2 is your topic sentence, and then subclaim 1, and then you would do your IE, and then you would use a transitional sentence there. You would repeat this and use a transitional sentence here, and then you would end here and use a closing sentence here. So those are just some ways in which you can kind of tackle this particular prompt. I want to take you back here and point out a couple of things, although I did do them in class. It doesn't hurt to remind you. Over here, you can see that I've put that question, and remember, it's in blue, it's color-coded from the beginning. So again, in that first claim, because we're following the prompt, it's asking you, how do humans respond when confronted with suffering in today's society? The writer needs to provide enough detail for the reader so that the reader can understand behavioral patterns. And I've listed here, and further down, the suggested text. You're not limited to those texts. I'm just trying to kind of pare it down for you. Again, you'll see where it says note. Let me scroll this down a little bit. It says continue with the general format until you've gone through all the subclaims for claim 1. Keep in mind this claim may need multiple paragraphs, which we talked about, in order to articulate full support of your claim and overall argument. One of the things that when you look at your paper in front of you, really pay attention, and I mentioned this in class as well, the balance of evidence and analysis is I, and the I and the E is an important concept. So again, this ratio balance, he doesn't have to go in this particular template format, but again, the overall ratio of the point, you want a nice balance. All right, so for the second part, we pretty much have talked about that, but I just wanted to point this out to you. On this one, I've color-coded it again, because remember the second part, the consequences were in yellow. You'll see here on the left that the essential question for that claim 2 is, what are the effects or outcomes or consequences? So the writer needs to walk the reader through how the actions noted above, and what I mean by above is in your claim 1, cause specific outcomes. And our class discussions centered around poverty and homelessness, oppression of women through limited access of education, and crimes against humanity. Again, here I've put some suggested text. Some of them are duplicates, and again, you can use some of the ones that I suggested for the beginning part, but I was just trying to steer you in the right direction. Again, note that right here is the same as in the previous. So, it's once you've kind of mastered that first claim, the second claim I think will come a little easier. Remember, and really hear this when I say that, do not divide by sources. That is not the way to do it. You want to make sure that as you're thinking about structure, you're dividing by concept, by claim and subclaim. So again, you don't want to just say, oh, I'm just going to talk about this source, and make 4 paragraphs about 4 different sources. That is not going to be successful. So really pay attention to that, because I know that's a tendency that sometimes students want to fall into because they think it'll be easier, but that's not going to be successful in answering the prompt. Just want to point out here, I know we went over this in class, that the conclusion is all commentary. And really, when you think about your conclusion, think about that second sentence that I have highlighted. think about the relevance or lack of relevance in the world today and or social impacts of your argument. You really want to think about big picture and significance. We've used the term widen the lens, and that will